Hi, I'm Tom Burke, the Associate Dean for Public Health Practice here at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Welcome to Public Health on the Inside, your inside look into the world of public health. Today I want to introduce you to a friend and colleague here at the Bloomberg School who's an alum, but someone who's really on the front lines of public health. Dr. Ruben Del Prado is an international HIV expert, and he works for the United Nations Program on AIDS. But he also has amazing experience in many countries throughout the world. He grew up in Suriname, was educated as a physician, worked in the tropical jungles and paradise of Suriname before coming here to Hopkins. And I think Ruben has really perhaps the broadest cultural perspective that I've seen in colleagues here. And that's saying a lot because we get to travel the world and see a lot of different cultures. He worked before UNAIDS. He worked with PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization. He's worked for the European Commission and Johns Hopkins University. Before that, he was the director of the Suriname National AIDS Program and founded the Department of Public Health at the University of Suriname. Ruben, it's great to have you here. Welcome.
It's wonderful to be here, Tom.
First, I want to get a little bit of an idea of your background and your journey that brought you to Hopkins and to public health.
You know, Suriname is a very small country on the northeast coast of South America. And very often people say, like, Suri what? Suri where? So sometimes it's very good that people don't know where your country is, so they can't find you when you're into trouble, right? Well, it's a small country, 500,000 people. And as I told you before, 80% of the landmass is tropical rainforest. After medical school, I was fortunate enough to have become one of the first physicians to ever work in the jungles of Suriname with the Maroons. And the Maroons are the African runaway slaves when we had slavery in Suriname. So this was quite interesting. And this was probably my first real cultural experience, to work away from home in the jungles of my own country. What got me to Hopkins is quite interesting, too. There was an insurgency going on. The Maroons became rebels fighting the then military government. And I was the only physician with the hospital. And at one point, the rebels accused me of collaborating with the military. And the military accused me of siding with the rebels. So I had to get out. And where I went to was the United States of America, and I came to the then School of Hygiene and Public Health.
Amazing. We don't talk about it too much in public health, but sometimes what we do is dangerous.
It is dangerous, and when I talk to students, something that is probably the stuff I have the most fun in public health is talking to young minds and older minds, and I unlearn and they unlearn and we learn together. That is about the risk-taking in public health. And I think that is not something that you can teach anybody. It has to do with character.
So we have to be a little bit fearless.
We have to be fearless, and we have to be politicians, and we have to ask the question, what if all the time? And it cannot just be academics. It cannot just be academia. Academia is important to really juggle your mind and to make sure that, whatever is in your mind, that all parts of your brain are stimulated. It cannot just be academics. There has to be a practical what-if component.
I want to ask you about where you live now. You've had an amazing opportunity to really be involved on the front lines of public health practice throughout the world. Nepal and Bhutan, not a bad situation. Tell us about that.
It is not bad. The thing is about us that every 3-4 years, the big boss tells all of us that we have to look at being rotated out of the countries where we represent him, is the UNAIDS program. And I was in Guyana, right next to my own country in South America. And I had a choice, 4 countries, you have to give 4 countries. And it became Nepal. So I live in Kathmandu Valley, which is an amazing country. A little bit disappointing is the pollution. Everybody who visits after having been there after many, many years says, it wasn't like this when I was here 25 years ago. We hardly see the mountains anymore. And also there has been no constitution. And the government doesn't seem to be able to get its act together, which is a pity.
Wow. Well, I want to ask you about the cultural challenges. So one of the things we try, but we may not be too successful in teaching in school, is how do you adapt to those cultures that we have to in public health?
This is something that I'm very stubborn about. I don't call it cultural sensitivity, because you can never become culturally sensitive, and then it becomes a little bit of you're removing yourself and you're being a little bit condescending when you're culturally sensitive. You have to be respectful, which is a few steps removed from cultural sensitivity, because when you say you have to be culturally sensitive, without even realizing it, you're always putting yourself above the cultures you're talking about. Like, these are the wild people. We have to be culturally sensible to their needs and their ways of life. So it kind of puts you a little bit above them, so you have to stoop down. So I'm very careful with cultural sensitivity. I translate it into being respectful and understanding without compromising. And this is where the risk-taking becomes important. I remember people telling me, including my own staff of those countries, "Oh, but Ruben, you do not understand." And I remember saying and hearing myself say, "I do not want to understand this. This is not right. And this is what public health is all about. You must do what is right."
In public health, we don't take on the easy challenges, we take on the tough ones. And you're on the front lines of the HIV pandemic.
It's about human sexuality. And in most cultures on our planet, human sexuality is very often not spoken about, it's not talked about. So again, you must respectfully be aware of what you can talk about. Except when you want to save lives, you have to be sometimes very blunt and call a spade a spade. And you know what happens? When you find people in decision-making positions, and even those who are the ones you work for, into a comfortable space, you can talk about anything. You can talk about anything in wider public spaces and in big mass. "Oh, but we don't talk about this, and we don't even have a word for this in the police." And yet, when you get down to it, and when it comes down to what matters, it is a lot easier. And again, you have to be respectful.
Yeah. I think that's one of the amazing things about the public health community. We do talk about everything, and there is a tremendous amount of respect, and you're a living example of that. But I wanted to ask you a little bit now about the good news with HIV.
I remember on working one of the islands in the Caribbean, because I was covering the Caribbean at one point, 24 countries in the Dutch, English, French, and Spanish-speaking Caribbean. When this Minister of Health calls me and says, "Del Prado, you said that this thing would get out of hand, there would be an explosion of HIV. It's not happened in the last 5 years." I said, "Minister, because you did a good job." So public health is also this tricky thing that if you do your job well, the thing that was predicted and that has been invested in, both financially and by people power, if it doesn't happen, you may get a backlash and say, "Oh, I'm going to defund it because your predictions didn't come." They didn't come true because you did a good job. So what is happening with HIV globally right now? Things are starting to happen. Things are starting to happen. And I must say that the part that we call behavior communication, and I was trained in behavior change communication at this very school, has a limited contribution. We have to be honest about that. The whole concept of behavior change communication, the way it is presented very often, is very condescending. We're telling people, we know what you have to do, and you better do it because that's the right way to do it. It is the combination of these changes in behavior and adopting less risky behavior and science, Tom, and science that are at the heart of the success of HIV. We found out only 2.5, 3 years ago that when you put people on treatment for HIV, good antiretroviral treatment, that the viral load in the body is reduced so much that you can minimize or even stop transmission. And that, for the first time, was the scientific breakthrough we were waiting for. That is amazing. Not just telling people to use a condom or telling people to have less sexual partners. That works only partially. Now it is the combination of good public health practice for behavior change communication and basic science.
That's great to hear, because that's what we try to strive for in public health education, training in science, but also in communication and the behavioral aspects and cultural aspects of the challenges ahead. So let me ask you a little bit about the students and the future of public health. You have a job that so many of our students would be so interested in, and a career in that area they would love to pursue and travel the world. How do we prepare people best for the future?
You know, Tom, right before the podcast, I had coffee with an amazing young student. And let me give you an example about preparation. He told me about looking for funding for research he did in his country of origin on suicide. It seems that a lot of people who are left behind in the rural area, older people, are committing suicide. And he has done research in universities in the capital city of his country on the perception of young students on suicide. And he had 4 groups, one that had a little story, a little vignette about an older person, another one who read about suicide, another group, there were 4 groups, another group heard something about suicide in younger people. So it was really academic research. And he wants to get it funded so he can analyze it and produce a paper. I told him that what he has done is preparing for the implementation. Once he realizes and finds out what it is that has to happen to prevent people from committing suicide by doing focus group discussions with the actual people or family members. And then when it comes to the policymakers and the politics to implement your research findings, that's when you have to do this. What happens is we do all of this amazing academic research and service and studies. We do not implement them because they are too brainy and they are too academic. There's no bridge, like I like to call it. And this is the course I would like to one day teach at this school, the bridge between science, public health, and politics. Those 2 bridges have to be there. You cannot just have science, disconnected from public health, and then the huge disconnect between public health and politics.
Great message. We only have about a minute left. One thing I know about you, Ruben, is that you really love what you do, and public health for you was really fun. I want to talk a little bit about how much fun you have.
I have fun in life, and I'm fortunate. I think at one point in your life, you have to narrow down. You have to narrow down your scope a little bit and focus on something that you're going to work on. Otherwise, you'll be doing a little bit of everything. And you will not have, the benefit of results and successes if you do too much. So at one point in your life, this is me, and this is the message I would like to give to people who are still searching and looking. You have to narrow down and do not ever lose the heart-mind connection.
Dr. Del Prado, I want to thank you for being here and for giving us your amazing insights, and I want to thank all of you for listening. See you next time.